Please welcome Mary Kay Kushner and her presentation entitled Honoring Transitions: How Death Doulas Support Caregivers Grief. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Mary Kay, and I feel like I have a somewhat captive audience today. So if you're in the Iowa area, which I assume most of you are, this snowstorm is hitting hard. So my window shows me kind of the snow still falling, but I haven't been out yet today. So I hope you're safe, and I hope some of you are in your sweats and cozy and comfortable. Um, I was telling Courtney, the best talks that I've been to are typically interactive. So I really invite you to put any comments in the chat that can help add to our conversation today. I have lots I want to say, but I want to make sure it's also what you need, what you are needing. So the best way to do that is interaction. So my background is primarily as a chaplain for over 30 years. I was first a hospice chaplain. I was city hospice, and then after that became the palliative care chaplain at university hospitals. Um, and those experiences gave me direct contact with caregivers. For much of my work, I was in meetings, family meetings, or meeting one-on-one with family members, often because the loved one was compromised in some way, either comatose or actively dying. So my years as a chaplain have given me lots of experience. Also, I recently, I guess it'll be 2 years now, became certified as a death doula. So I don't know how many of you are familiar with death doulas, but today you get to learn about us if you are not. So that's kind of my professional life. But I also wanted to say, personally, my dad just died last week, and he was 93. And it was really a celebration of his life. He had the dwindles, as many of you know, where the tapering becomes very difficult. And it starts to tap at the dignity, right? And I just thought, Dad needs a dignified death. So the last 24 hours, he was moved to a hospice house and was able to get that peaceful, dignified death. So I'm very grateful. Just got back from Ohio yesterday, had a lovely, very Catholic funeral for him. And so I celebrate Dad. The flip side of that is 30 years ago, my brother David died at age 30 from a brainstem glioblastoma. That was a very different experience, and much more intense, much more out of the cycle of life. So I come to you with those past issues. And I also was thinking for you caregivers, I have a daughter with special needs, and Anna is now 25, but caring for a 25-year-old young woman who is nonverbal and has lots of needs makes me feel a kindred spirit with you. So I hope that we can learn together and honor transitions as we encounter them. So I'm going to go ahead and share my slideshow from the beginning. So here we are with title and objectives today. I want to tell you about what a death doula can do. I want to talk a little bit about the role of a caregiver. I also want to talk about grief. Grief is one of those topics that we really need to be updated on current information about grief. And finally, to look at what self-compassion might mean for you in your transitions. Some of you may have heard of the death positive movement. It's fairly recent. It was started by Caitlin Doty, a young funeral director, because she was becoming more and more upset in her work with families by how little families knew what their loved one who had died wanted. So she said clearly, we know all of us will die. What can we do to make the process more manageable and less taboo? So she created the death positive movement. There are 8 tenets of the death positive movement that are very basic, like it's okay to talk about death. It's okay to plan our own death. It's okay to be with the body of a dead person. Um, Things like that, that are basic tenets. I invite you to look up if you're curious. And then Dr. Downer, a palliative care doctor, said death, one of the last taboos, needs to come out of the closet. So I am part of the death positive movement because I share that belief. When we talk about things, we take away the fear of them, and we make them more manageable. So that is what death doulas are all about. A death doula, or an end of life doula, is someone who provides companionship, comfort, and guidance to those facing a serious illness or death. So, even with a recent diagnosis of something life threatening, a death doula can be contacted. We are non medical, holistic, and we look at the emotional, spiritual, and practical issues involved with end of life or serious illness. You may have heard the word doula in reference to a birth doula, because that has been its more common usage since the 60s. So most people are very familiar. So doula is really someone who helps with transitions. And I'm always hesitant to compare birth and death. Yes, they are both transitions, but you end up with very different outcomes. So while I get that, transitions are happening all the time. So it's not just the birth and the death, but it's probably why one of the names I do not like is death wife. I am not a death, I guess I am a death wife. I just don't like that title. Death midwife, still not great. I prefer end of life doula. I say death doula because we hate that D word so much. We will do anything to avoid saying the word death. So I say it purposely to help normalize saying it. Thanadula, Thanatos is the Greek god of death. No one knows what a Thanadula is, but it's a fun word. Community death care advocate is great. I'm part of a group of death doulas called Community Death Doulas. And I like that because now that I'm really not part of any system, I retired from UIHC in 2022. I now see myself as a community partner, somebody who goes out as a consultant to help those in the community deal with death and dying. I am certified as an end of life specialist. And that's one of the things that is becoming more standardized. Not all death doulas are certified. So, just important details about our profession. We consider ourselves partners in the process. We want to go at your pace. And so part of this is getting to know you and your loved one. Recently, when I worked with a gentleman and his wife, I first met them and he was ready to do, I'm sure you've heard of voluntary stopping eating and drinking, or VSED. And he was so emotional in talking about it. I mean, he wanted to have it to happen like tomorrow. And as we were talking, it became apparent to me that he just wasn't ready. So part of this is getting to know persons and where they are in that transition process so that we can help them. We are experts on grief and we are non-judgmental. So I think that's crucial to dealing with people who are vulnerable. None of us should be going in with any agenda whatsoever. We are really here to meet others' needs, not our own. That's a basic chaplain uh, premise as well. So Alua Arthur is kind of our, I want to say, national representative. She is a powerhouse. And I want us to watch a video that Alua did. It's a short video, but it's a great summary of what a death doula does. She started, her company is called Going with Grace. So she trains death doulas and of course does the work of a death doula. So give me a minute. Courtney and I practiced this. Okay, why? Oh, okay, just a second. Stop. Sorry. Here we go. There. All right. And let me make sure you can hear her. There we go. Can you all see this?
Yep, we can see the screen.
Alua Arthur
And we
is
can hear
referred
here.
to as a
Great,
death
thank you.
doula, someone who helps people at the end of life. Her story was discovered through our brief but spectacular open call for ideas from the public. Founder of the organization Going with Grace, Arthur guides individuals and families, reframing the conversation to help people think about what they value most in life. Tonight, Arthur shares her brief but spectacular take on living like we're dying.
I really still struggle with why we're not talking about death culturally and societally, because for me, it seems to be the most enriching conversation that we could have. There's a great big what happens after we die that nobody has an answer to that just scares the living daylights out of most of us. My brother-in-law, Peter St. John, was diagnosed with Burkitt's lymphoma. So I went out to New York and essentially walked Peter and my sister and my niece through the last 2 months of his life. I did all the supportive things around his death, and it was, I think, helpful to have somebody else to think about those things and handle them. Peter's end of life was the way that I finally saw what the need actually is and what the role could properly look like. A death doula is somebody who does all of the non-medical care and support of the dying person and the family or the circle of support through the process. There's a number of details that people really overlook when it comes to preparing for death. Things like who you want to make your decisions for you in the event that you can't, what type of life support you want, what kind of care you want to receive at the end of your life. We need to look holistically at our lives and think about all the information and knowledge that only we hold that's going to be really hard for somebody that we love to handle after we die. One interesting element of the work is that we learn to understand that we're going to be falling in love with people that are leaving all the time. And so going in, you form these really tight relationships, you get to know people, you get to know their families, you get to know what they cared about. It's hard to not fall in love with them. We grieve with them and we grieve for them as well. Planning for our deaths is a really important tool and powerful way to help us understand what we value in our lives. For example, when I'm thinking about my death, I'm thinking about my relationships, who I loved, how I loved them, whether or not I was loved. I'm thinking about my work, what imprint have I made on the world. I'm thinking about my legacy. Will anybody care after I'm gone? My hope is that from my work, people take away how precious this life is, that they really engage with this gift that we've been given to feel and to breathe and to eat and to have sex and to dance and to cry and to feel the full gamut of emotions while we're here, because it's a very, very brief time that we're here. My name is Alua Arthur, and this is my brief but spectacular take on living like we're dying.
And what a great gift. And you can find more of our brief but spectacular videos online at pbs.org/newshour/brief. Alua Arthur is referred to as a death.
So I hope you appreciated Alua's words about how dealing with death helps us emphasize and maybe reclaim our values in life. So she's a great spokesperson for that. All right, let me go back to our PowerPoint. Okay. So I wanted to talk about the particulars. What can a death doula do? We are trained in completing advance directives. Of course, these can be done in a doctor's office, but you and I know that a doctor is very pushed for time. And so filling out forms is not typical in a doctor's office. It's certainly wonderful to get your physician's input, what he or she thinks might be best for you. What's nice about an advance directive is that the questions actually force you to think about what you want. What are your choices? I even asked my mom this because she does not have an advance directive. So my mom, being a very Catholic woman, said, God's timing is perfect. And I said, Mom, we interfere with God's timing all the time in medicine. I said, we keep bodies alive, we keep people here way beyond. I mean, even a resuscitation, some might consider interfering with God's timing, right? So interfering with God's timing is a really important expression of a person's belief system. So once I said to Mom, okay, so let's say we resuscitate you, we get you to the hospital, and you're on life support. How long do we keep you on life support? And so was explaining to her that sometimes it's important to say, let's give 3 to 5 days. And if we don't see an improvement, then the body is telling us that improvement is not possible. So Mom said, okay, give me a week. So I now know Mom's parameters if she's ever on life support. And that conversation is really important. I can't tell you how many times people in a family meeting would say, do everything, just do everything. And that's their default to, I have no idea what this person wanted. Doing everything is not ethically appropriate. So I would often say, just because we can doesn't mean we should. That is such an important statement. Just because we can put a feeding tube in doesn't mean we should. Just because we can keep someone alive on pressors in an ICU doesn't mean we should. So completing advance directives is probably one of our first and primary roles. Discussing issues and concerns about end of life. Some people have never been asked, what do you fear most about your dying? And for many, it's pain. They need to become aware of the multitude of pain meds, pain therapies that are available to help ensure that they are not in pain at the end of life. Some of those things are just simple, practical. Some people need to know that there's even a med to take away awareness if pain is not manageable. Many just find comfort in knowing that. In my over 30 years of practice, I saw that used maybe 4 times where we were unable to control pain through all the methods provided. And so we did what's called respite sedation, where consciousness is alleviated to alleviate the suffering, right? Explaining options for medical decisions. I put this in there probably because of my background. This would certainly require medical professionals' input as well. But even just knowing that something as simple as when you put someone on life support, you can ethically remove that life support. It's ethically appropriate. It doesn't feel that way emotionally, but ethically it's appropriate if life support is not providing an improvement for what's happening. So lots of things like that. How many of you have a plan for a good death? Rarely do we think about this, but I will tell you, mine includes being offered chocolate and potato chips. Because that's my quality of life. If I can still taste something, I want it to be those two things. I also hope that there's some good music in the background, and I want people to gather. Maybe not 10 and 20 at a time, but I want people to come and tell stories and hold my hand. We can all hope for that kind of a good death. And, you know, we are so used to making birth plans. And I remember having birth plans for all 4 of my children. How many of those came to be? Similarly for a good death, but we are doing better now at anticipating end of life and enabling a plan to be lived out. We, of course, support the dying person and their loved one. People don't talk about death vigils. You know, hospice back in the day, nurses did not have the patient load that they have now. And nurses would stay for hours. The primary nurse would stay with their patient for hours with the family, supporting them through this. That is not the case now. And a death doula is the perfect person because we do not take on overbearing caseloads. We are being very intentional about the number of people that we take on because of this. And then certainly helping to plan a funeral or a wake or a celebration of life that can happen before a death even, if wanted. Okay. Now I'm shifting to you caregivers. You know that caregiving is difficult and that it requires all of you, physical, emotional, spiritual. It is other directed. You are being of service to your loved one. It helps us to feel needed. So it does meet our needs. And most of us do it willingly. So it can be meaningful. We are giving back, perhaps to a parent who raised us and cared for us. So there can be great meaning, and it may become overwhelming. None of us can anticipate what that caregiving is going to look like or how long it's going to last. So I just want to speak to some of the realities of that. Many of you may not have chosen this role, especially with a traumatic brain injury. This was not expected. It was not planned. It is something that happened, a crisis that then changed your entire life. Certainly, you may not have understood all that would be required. And it may have changed your identity as a spouse, to a caregiver, as an adult child, to being a nurse for a parent. That's a big thing to have happen. Some of you may have had to left a job that you loved, where you were doing something very different. And that needs to be taken into account, that loss. Some of you may injure yourselves while offering care. I know a woman who is caring for her husband with ALS. She has had several back injuries. She broke her fingers. It had nothing to do with the caregiving, But again, trying to care for someone with broken fingers, it all starts to take its toll. So none of us like to talk about the resentment that can happen. One of the things my mom missed is dad just couldn't stay awake. And she used to love to watch sports with him. And so she would get upset when he would fall asleep. And then she would feel ashamed of herself or guilty for feeling resentful that he couldn't stay awake. So you have those resentments that you may not have spoken to others about, but we as caregivers know what those resentments are about. So I asked Mom, what would you like me to tell others? You've been caring for Dad. And she said, patience. And she said, it's easier said than done. She tried to be patient with Dad, but they were two very stubborn people. So she said, give them the benefit of the doubt. There were times when she didn't think Dad understood what she was asking of him, even if it was just to scoot to the top of the bed. And so the frustrations that come from them not complying. So she also, some of this is basic psychology, gentle encouragement, letting them have a choice. Does this sound like a good idea? That could get a no response, right? So there were times Dad didn't want to eat, and Mom, of course, wanted him to eat. So we all know that kind of a struggle here in Iowa. Food equals caring. When your patience is gone, you need a break. And sometimes that is simply walking away and going into another room, counting to 10, taking a few deep breaths, and trying the same thing over again. Other times, it may mean that the caregiving is no longer working. And that's what my mom had to face at the end. So you know what your inner voice is telling you. And then Mom added to thank them when they comply. Any response to that, Courtney?
Yeah, I will share that one of our attendees, Melinda, shared that she's been helping her mom for 11 years.
Wow.
She'll be 96 soon and has started forgetting a lot. So she's her rememberer. And she said, although she chose that role, she didn't realize it would go on so many years, but it has been very good for her.
11 years, Melinda. Blessings on your 11 years. I'm sure you could tell stories. Thank you for, go ahead.
I was just saying, we also had another attendee share that she's so thankful that you're here today, Mary Kay, but also extends her sympathies and that you have to be on today after the recent.
Oh, that is so kind. That is so kind. I need you to know I have amazing support. So I'm from a family of 8, and some of you know dark humor, or I hope all of you know dark humor. Oh, and I hope you have friends and family who can laugh and cry with you. There were times with my mom where we were laugh crying, and you know exactly what I mean by that, when you're doing both at once. And it's probably the healthiest thing you can do. So I need you to know that, yes, it's only been a week, but I will say we have been anticipating this for a long time, and I have had tremendous support. Courtney asked me if I wanted to cancel, and I didn't, because I feel very passionately about what I have to offer. And likewise, I have had very good support. So thank you for your kindness in that.
I will say one more thing, Mary Kay.
Yeah.
Melinda, who is the person that shared that she's been taking care of her mom for 11 years, spoke to your slide that you just
Oh,
did on
yeah.
patience. And she said one issue with patients has been recovery from knee replacements. It's hard to be so
Oh,
patient when your body hurts so much and painkillers are affecting your thinking.
ugh. Thank you, Melinda. And I'll hope the healing speeds up, right? So we can't talk about caregiving and transitions without talking about grief. And I'm just doing a 101 on grief because we need to appreciate grief is happening all the time. Grief is any reaction to loss. And by loss, I do not mean just death. I mean loss of independence, loss of, yeah, being able to stand up, Melinda, right? Driving, loss of your usual daily routine. So we are grieving all the time. The other thing, unfortunately, we were taught that it's a problem. You got to get over your grief, you got to get past it. It is a normal reaction to loss, not a problem to be solved. And if we could remember that, it would do us so much good. Thirdly, it has no particular time frame. And this is where it's very hard to hear well wishers who will say, well, gosh, it's been 2 months since the, TBI. Uh, aren't you okay by now? Or it's been 2 years. Aren't you okay by now? And I just want to say, grief is a forever kind of thing. It's a process of readjustment. So to be able to say to people, I'm still adjusting, thank you very much. When my brother died 30 years ago, of course, I continue to think about David and Dad's death. We've been laughing about David showing Dad the ropes, which would be a real role reversal. But let's acknowledge that grief is a normal process of life and not just when someone dies. So I really hope that you can give some gentle pushback to people who want to make themselves feel better by using cliches when you're hurting. So find the people who don't need to say those things. Alan Wolfelt and his Center for Loss and Transition out in Colorado is a great website to go to for all different kinds of grief issues. So I encourage you to visit his website if you feel you need information on grief.
Mary Kay,
Yes.
I
Mhm.
will. This is Courtney. I will. I have permission to share, so I'd like to share. One of
Mm.
the things that I learned interacting with you and hearing about what you do on a personal level, I will share that my uncle and my aunt had you as their death doula.
Mm.
And one of the many things that I've learned in speaking with my aunt about that process is not just how you help usher usher a person into death, that kind of grief, but also live the live grief while someone is still here, and you're
Mm.
sort of that ambiguous loss where someone is still here, but they're not that version of themselves that somebody once knew, and they're changing sometimes rapidly, and you're losing them, and that's sort of that idea of live grief. And I was really struck by the way that you supported my aunt and uncle and my cousins in that live grief, sort of preparing them for the end. I thought that was such a beautiful part of what you do.
Courtney, I love that term, live grief.
Well, so much we think about when we think about grief, we think about it meaning that someone has died.
Right,
It
but
was this
live
process
grief.
of Yeah, it was this process of grieving him while he was still here because
Yeah.
he wasn't the healthy version of himself that we once knew, and we were
Right.
losing him live. I felt like that was worth mentioning. I think that's such a huge part of what you do.
Oh, I really appreciate that, Courtney. And, your aunt, who is a wise woman herself, she afterwards was being way too hard on herself about her grief process. And of course, trying to control it because we all love to be in control. And I remember her breakthrough of finally realizing not needing to control her grief.
Oh,
So it is a learning process all the way through. And yeah, I really appreciate you sharing that live grief. That's genius.
well, thank you for what you did for our family.
Oh, yes. You're welcome. Anticipatory grief is the normal grief that happens before death. So, this is some of what you were talking about, Courtney, because of course, as a person is diminishing, we are saddened that they aren't as sharp, that they aren't as able, and we're preparing ourselves for the eventual outcome, um, and the what ifs. So, what if? He falls and dies? Or what if I'm not here when they die? So I've always said to people, when you are leave taking, even if it's for an errand or something simple, and your loved one is with someone else, to make sure you say those I love yous or goodbyes, not knowing if that will be the last. So anticipatory grief is an essential part of the process. It helps us manage our expectations, and it may help us address issues or concerns. For my dad, it was getting a hospital bed. Boy, was my mom stubborn about that. And once we got the hospital bed in, she was going to put him in the guest room. And I said, Mom, no, needs to hold court right out in the living room, right where everybody is. And she said, Oh, I never thought about holding court. And there are privacy screens and other things that can help with the personal cares and things. But just that simple little shift to dad holding court rather than being, how do you want to say, exposed and vulnerable. So yeah, lots of, what do I want to call it, reframing, reframing of things.
Mary Kay, we had a comment
Oh,
that I want to
yes.
share with you. Haley shared that, sorry about my voice, I'm getting over COVID. I have 2 years of experience being a CNA at a nursing home. This
Mm,
experience gave me the knowledge and skills to care for my grandfather in the last week of his life. The time and care I was able to give him during this stage of his life is an experience I wouldn't change for the world. I miss
mm.
him deeply. Thank you for your compassion.
Ah, being a CNA, you are a saint. You do all the hard work. So thank you for your professional as well as your personal service. Um, Your grief, those of you who are caring for someone with a TBI, began at diagnosis, and you know that. You probably remember the day as if it was yesterday. It changed identities for you and your loved one, loss of who you were, and uncertainty about who you were becoming. Um, that's huge, huge. And then the stress of symptoms, behaviors, and care needs. And I want to talk about behaviors a little bit. We tend to think that behaviors are always intentional. My mom was getting very frustrated with dad. And I said, Mom, he can't help this. The falling asleep is what I'm talking about. I said, Mom, his body, I think he would love to be awake with you and enjoying the game, but his body can no longer do that. There are also behaviors that are much worse than falling asleep, and we all know that. The sometimes outbursts and even if it's verbal and physical, those are really stressful because you know the person you love would never be meaning to do this, but the brain is so complex and causes behaviors that none of us want. And then there are hidden fears. Can I keep doing this? How much longer am I going to be doing this? Um, and I had one woman who said, everybody always says he looks so good. And that feels like such an affront to her because he is not so good. She knows the behind the scenes him. So he looks so good, he looks so good. And of course, people are saying that, thinking that's a good thing to say. So so many of these things are hard to anticipate. Okay. And then societal expectations. I really think the reason my mom kept my dad home for so long is she is of that generation that worries so much about what everyone thinks. So dad should have been in that hospice house a week before he was, and it was really mom's sense of what will other people say. So be sure to do what's right, not what you think other people need you to do. Okay.
One thing that I
Sorry.
want to thank you for mentioning, and just want to take a second to mention, Mary Kay, is
Yes.
that hidden fears piece. Um, or maybe I don't know if it falls into that category or not, but the couple caregivers, the few caregivers that I've known personally, and then also the ones that we serve at the Brain Injury Alliance, the common thing that I've heard upon their loved one's death that is always so hard for them to say, but we really work to normalize it, is relief. You know,
Yes. Yes.
the idea of both and thinking they're both grieving,
Yes.
but they've been in that caregiver role has been how they've been identified. It's been their
Right.
identity for so long, and to be able to
Right.
utter the words, I miss them so much, but I'm also relieved
Really.
that
Yes.
their suffering has ended, and
Yes.
that I have hope for the future, and that I can do things that I love. I found
Right.
that that's something that we often hear, and it's so hard for them to admit.
Yes. Yes. And not feel badly about. So, yes. We all like to be in control. I mean, this seems obvious. Things happen unexpectedly. And so the need for flexibility, and sometimes we just can't manage it. I do not like letting go. To me, that always feels like jumping off a cliff. So I use the phrase letting flow. And I hope that will help you with shifting out of some of that control. All of us have secrets that we are afraid to voice. When will this end? How will this end? Can I keep doing this? There's that what do others think? And ultimately, am I a good person? I want to shift to self compassion because studies show that we are not always our own best friend. Are you aware of negative self talk? And if so, can you stop it? We say horrible things to ourselves that we would never say to a good friend. Instead, can we affirm ourselves as we would a trusted friend? Can we be gentle with ourselves? Can we be kind? Kristen Neff was a professor, is a no, she's not at Harvard anymore. But I love that she was at Harvard when she began her work on self compassion. Sounds so soft science, doesn't it? It's not. It's legit and it's important. And I invite you to visit her selfcompassion.org website. She has simple exercises to help shift that negative self talk and instead start applauding ourselves for what we're doing. So I hope that if things have become overwhelming and meaningless, that you will find someone to talk with about why you're doing what you're doing, if it needs to become more manageable. Forgiveness, I think, is such an essential part of caregiving. I remember when my brother died, I needed to forgive God. I just was so mad that God allows a world where bad things like this happen. And so, for those of you struggling with your spirituality, exploring the mystery of it all, I don't know if no regrets is possible. So, after I did this slide, I thought, how can I have fewer regrets? Might be a better way to talk about that. Okay, so I'm hoping that you have a plan, both for your person and for yourself, and that you will be willing to talk to your person about what they want. If it becomes too emotional, you have options. Guess what that option is? It might be a death doula, or it might be a trusted friend or physician. But when death happens, can you allow yourself to be? There is no need to rush. There is no need to do. I will tell you that in my work, guilt is often the first attempt at meaning. We're trying to make sense of the loss. And so this goes back to that self-compassion. So many of us start with, if only I would have been more patient. If only, whatever, you fill in the blank. Emotions will come and go. And so the more you try to control them, the harder your grief will be. So I hope you have heard the adage that emotions are neither good nor bad, they simply are. Again, gentle, soften that self-judgment. And here's what Courtney was talking about. Feeling relieved is normal. My dad was no longer who he was. And I think I said it was starting to affect his dignity. And so him having died last week was a blessing. It was time. Oh, here's the cliches. Protect yourself from those people and trust the process. After a death, we are forever changed. I do think grief lessens over time. And Wolfelt would say, create a relationship with the deceased. I still talk to David. I guess I can start talking to Dad. That'll be different. But I wanted to share with you. So look for signs and dreams that offer meaning. I've had so many of these happen that I can share that I am certain there is a next dimension. And I think we have something to look forward to, but I certainly respect people who believe death is the end. But I would tell you, once officiating a funeral for a spouse who had lost his wife, he was lost. He was just so in such pain. And so I remember him sitting in front of me during the funeral. And as we were going through the service, I suddenly noticed an orange butterfly, not a monarch. It was an orange butterfly. And it came and landed on his shoulder. And I will tell you, it took our breath away. And I said, I don't know how to tell you this, but that butterfly means something. And he knew immediately that it was his wife. And how did that butterfly get in that funeral home? There were no windows open. Sure, the doors had opened, but I will tell you, you could say that was just a coincidence, but thankfully for this spouse, it was of great meaning for him. I'm sure you've heard about cardinals. I don't know why cardinals seem to be the story, the symbol of people who have died. I don't know if any of you have ever experienced the sighting of cardinals. And for some people, it's because their loved one liked cardinals. Um, but I hope you have stories like that to help you just get a taste of wonder and awe at what lies ahead. Anything, Courtney? Anybody?
No, nothing personal. Oh, wait, actually, I had there's a couple actually.
Okay.
Okay, great. So,
Oh,
I'll just kind of start going through them.
all
So
right.
Melinda said a great peace came over me before I learned that my daughter had died in a car accident. So there was
Oh,
grief.
oh, wow.
Haley said I had a dream the night prior to my grandfather's funeral. Oh, where he hugged me and said, "I'm going home." It was very,
Wow.
I was very sure it was him visiting me.
Wow.
Leah shared that my mother-in-law sees her oldest daughter who passed as dragonflies.
I
And
love that.
oh, these are so beautiful. And Christine shared that 6 months after her son died, a yellow and black butterfly landed near her on the beach, and it just has stayed with it and
Yeah.
just stayed for what felt like forever. Oh,
Uh, wow.
those are beautiful.
Those are great. Oh, I'm so glad you guys shared those. Thank you for doing that. I was hoping there would be some stories. I will tell you that after my brother died, I was I had a huge faith crisis, and I just thought, oh, that all of this is just a bunch of hooey. And David came to me in a dream. I was 13 months older than David, and my biggest worry was he okay? You know, that sense of protection. And David came to me in a dream in our old backyard, you know, where we grew up. And he said, "Mare, I'm okay." And I, to this day, say that was more than a dream. It was a connection. And David knew that I just needed to know he was okay. So I hope that there will be signs or dreams that can offer you meaning as well. Okay. What is happening? Sorry.
Oh, it's okay. We're still on
It's,
the after a death slide.
yeah. And I'm trying to forward it, but me and technology. Oh, this is so bizarre. Sorry. Let's do this and let me go back in. Okay. There we go. And page down. So, death doulas are here to help. So now we're beginning to get out there. Typically, you can Google for a death doula in your community, even if you just look for online information. We have a website up, but it's not very active, but it is communitydeathdoulas.com. There is also in the Iowa City area, what are they called? The Death Collective, and they offer death cafes on the last Tuesday of every month. So, and I would tell you, 40 to 50 people attend those death cafes. If you're not familiar what a death cafe is, it was started in the UK, and basically people come together, and in the UK it would be over tea and crumpets. Here in Iowa City, they have rented space at the Greenhouse, which is a woman-owned restaurant where you can get different drinks. So typically people come, they get a drink of their choosing, and then somebody will bring either baked cookies or some kind of a sweet for everyone to share. None of that is necessary, but it helps create a sense of informality. And after a few ground rules, of course, being respectful of each other's time and that no one has the answer, we're all just sharing ideas, then each smaller group opens up to discuss whatever anyone wants to talk about. I have been to several of those, and we have talked about sky burials, which is not legal, but I'd never even heard of sky burials, to a young woman who talked about being afraid of being buried alive, but also being afraid of cremation. So she was not aware of green or natural burial that is going to be available here in Iowa at some point. It is in process. I know it's available in Colorado. Um, so death cafes become a place where talking about death is the norm. So I hope that you will do some planning, find some resources that help you, and that you will take the first step to getting help. And I really want to affirm, you can do this because you are doing this. So that's what I have to offer. And I really appreciate your time today. Um, and you can reach me via email. I should have put this at Mary Kushner, Kusner 50 at gmail.com if you want any one-on-one conversation.
Mary, I just put your Mary Kay, I
Oh,
just put
good.
your email in the chat box for everybody.
Perfect. Perfect.
Then I do have some comments that I'd like to share before we stop here.
Okay.
Jessica said that a monarch butterfly landed on her dad's casket at the gravesite, and that was a sure sign for her.
So cool.
A question. You had
Yes.
mentioned someone from Colorado related to the grief process, and there was a website you mentioned.
Yes, Alan Wolfelt, centerforloss.com.
Centerforloss.com.
Correct.
I'll put that there. And then let's see some more. Let's see here. What resources can we access to obtain certification? I'm interested in this as well, actually, as a death doula in Iowa.
Oh gosh, there are so many certifying bodies that I'm hesitant to. INELDA is one that is really taking the lead in getting certification standardized. So INELDA, can I do it? INELDA
I found
is the, oh,
I'll put it in the chat box. I just
thank you. It
that.
Iowa. Oh, why can't I remember?
International End of Life Doula Association.
Thank you. International. I thought it was Iowa.
Oh,
Aren't we?
well, hey,
International. Thank you.
sure. And then some, just some nice feedback. Wonderful
Mm.
training, so informative. Thank you. Somebody just found the Death Cafe online. The next one
Great.
is February 25th from 7 to 9.
Oh, yes. Great.
Thank you. Thank you for your time. Appreciate all you do.
Okay.
Very informative for what can be a tough topic. Oh, thank you. Leaves me with a feeling of release. Lots and
Oh,
lots.
good.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. The information is so helpful. And I'm just going to echo that as well. Personally and professionally, Mary Kay, thank you for what it's such
You're
important.
very welcome. Thanks for the opportunity, Courtney.
Yes, thank
Stay
you.
warm.
I'm going to go ahead, everybody, and put the post. This is the post webinar. Hold on a moment. The post webinar knowledge check and presenter evaluation. I'm going to go ahead and copy and paste that there. That is due tomorrow before noon. And again, Mary Kay, thank you so very much.
You're welcome. Blessings, everyone.
Thank you so much.